Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Hope everybody's having a good evening or afternoon or like really early morning or whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me for the show. As usual, I will be going through my questions I have received ahead of time from my Patreon patrons and my channel members. So if you are watching us live and you're in the chat and you have something you want to ask me in the chat or something you want me to see in the chat, if you're thinking of being generous tonight and giving me a super chat, please, if possible, hold on to all of that until I get through the patron and member questions, because I will not be paying super close attention to the live chat while I'm doing the patron questions. And then once I get through all of those, then I will turn my attention to the live chat for the rest of the show, and I will talk about whatever you want, and I would be very, very happy to receive your super chats and thank you appropriately for them. But anyway, let's start out, as we always do, by going to the patron and member questions. And the first one of those this time around is from Stephen G. Clenard, who says, Steve, you're a DC Comics guy. Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. Suppose it's the annual Justice League Secret Santa gift exchange, and you've drawn Batman. What do you get the guy that already has all the best toys? How is this even fair? Why couldn't I get Shazam? He's a preteen orphan boy. How screwed am I? FML. I hate Christmas. Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a villain's henchman? Joe Courier delivery minion. For when your ridiculously oversized gift box with big red bow that almost certainly does not contain a bomb or other such nasty surprise absolutely positively must be delivered on time. Service with a creepy grease paint smile, serving the greater Gotham City metropolitan area, except East End. Too dangerous. Thoughts? Great premise, as always. I think not only is Joe Courier delivery minion a great idea for a character, if Gotham City, if the Gotham City of the comics was a real place, it would be a great idea for a career. That is a niche that obviously needs to be filled in that world. Like, who's dropping off these giant boxes that are full, like the episode of Batman the Animated Series where there was the big box that was dropped off in police headquarters, and they finally solve the puzzle, and the box falls open, and it's like a computer terminal, with like a virtual reality set hooked up to it. And this is the early 90s, so that fucker was huge. Who brought that into police headquarters? Was it just some guy on a with a dolly who just rolled it in? So yeah, Joe Courier is a great idea and a very necessary idea, I think. And he would have to be a very inventive guy with a lot of initiative and a lot of creativity to move those things around. And yeah, you're screwed. If you get Batman for Secret Santa, you're screwed. I guess maybe just, just get him a card. Like, get him a card and get him like a gift certificate. Find out, where he gets his batarangs. What I'm sure he gets them from some guy who makes them custom for him, right? There's probably like a guy who does like the batarangs, or like they're in various versions of the comics or in some of the TV shows and movies. There's like, someone like what's her name, Edna from The Incredibles, who makes the costumes. There's always like somebody like that who sort of serves the superhero community. So just get Batman like a gift card to that person, whoever they are. So next time he needs an upgrade, it's like, it's on me, Bats. Merry Christmas, something like that. You can't go wrong with a gift card. Anyway, next question is from Glenn H. Hey, Steve, hope this finds you well. I've been asked to write reviews of episodes of Star Trek for a website that some friends and I are starting about everything Star Trek. I've never done anything like that before. I was 7 when TOS premiered and have been a fan of Trek my entire life. Just wondered if you had any tips for me to make the reviews engaging. Well, to make the reviews engaging, I think the most important thing is to find your own voice as a writer and your own personality and point of view. It's not just anybody writing reviews of Star Trek. It's you. So what do you bring to the table? What do you think about these things? And the most important job of any reviewer, of any critic, is very simple, is just, in the case of a TV series, you watch the show, you think about the show, either while you're watching it or after you've watched it, or ideally both. You decide what you feel about it, what you think about it. Is there a through line that you can sort of draw through the episode that kind of ties everything together? You know, if like what was the part about the episode that jumped out the most at you, whether for good or for bad? What was the episode ultimately about? And can you phrase that, and succinctly? Can you summarize that in a line or two? Um, do stuff like that, and find your voice and just articulate what you thought or felt about the episode. And really, I mean, it can get a lot more complicated than that, and there are different ways you can go with it. But ultimately, at the bottom of it all, that's what a critic does. A critic experiences a piece of art, watches the movie, watches the TV show, studies the painting, listens to the music, whatever, and then articulates for the audience of their review what they thought about it, what it did for them, you know? And that's what you need to do with your Star Trek reviews. And, and like I say, to make it engaging, you need to find you need to find what makes you as a critic, as a reviewer, as a writer unique, and put that through, so that people will care about reading your reviews, because there's a million people who do Star Trek reviews. What makes your videos? I'm talking about myself now. What makes your reviews special and unique and would draw people to them? So you need to figure that out. And I can't tell you how to do that, but that's something you need to figure out. And that's the most important thing. And other than that, it's just talking about, finding a way to intelligently describe what your reaction, what your response, what your thoughts on the episode are. Eric Byer, thank you for pulling together your Turkey Day special. It was awesome. How did you convince Jack to join in? Well, the secret is Jack will do pretty much anything you ask him to in exchange for a bottle of Jameson. So you just need to know how to talk to Jack and what to be holding teasingly in your hand as you are talking to him. And once you're, sort of like, Jack, I was thinking we'll do maybe like a Thanksgiving, like a Thanksgiving video where we watch, some old educational films and make fun of them, like Mystery Science Theater. What do you think of that, buddy? You want to do that with us? And you just kind of place it in front of him. And he's very agreeable if you know how to make the approach. So it was getting Jack involved was actually not a problem. Andrew Priest, good morning or good evening, Steve. Hope all is well. I had a few really good ideas for cutting, witty, thought-provoking questions, but since I can't be arsed with all that, I'll keep it simple. How many Star Destroyers do you think it would need to defeat the Enterprise D? A mutual friend tells me there is a right answer, so expect a lecture if you get it wrong. I love that there is apparently a right answer for which make pretend ship would beat the other make pretend ship, but there is an objectively right answer. So great, awesome. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what the relative size is. I get the impression just from the way Star Destroyers are shot in Star Wars movies that they are huge. So I would guess that a Star Destroyer is probably a lot bigger than the Enterprise D, even though the Enterprise D, as far as Star Trek ships go, is one of the bigger ones. But I'm just making a guess based on visual stuff, having no idea what the relative scales are, and honestly, not giving a shit. It seems to me that the Star Destroyers would be a lot bigger than even a ship the size of the Enterprise. So, one? But then again, maybe the Enterprise would be faster and more maneuverable, so maybe the Enterprise could take a Star Destroyer, so you would need more than one. I honestly don't know. And, if I was writing it, the Star Destroyers wouldn't defeat the Enterprise D. The Enterprise D would blow up the Star Destroyer because Star Trek is better. but I'll just say one. I'll just say one. And if there is a lecture coming about why I am objectively wrong about the number of imaginary ships that it would take to win a fight against another imaginary ship, I will await that eagerly. Frau M. Hi, Steve. Last time there was a discussion about replicators in the chat. I think I was late to the chat. My question got lost, so I'm going to ask here again. Replicators can replicate nearly everything, and the basic physiological needs, referring to Maslow's hierarchy of needs of humans, are met. So, a huge factor that contributes to mental health issues in real life doesn't apply to people in the Federation, right? How about other factors? Is the society just so advanced that everyone is mentally healthy, resting within themselves, able to deal with their emotions, involved in supportive relationships, etc.? In short, are the psychological and self-fulfillment needs met? Or did the creators just not address this? I know there are some episodes involving Reg Barkley, but I think they were a poor approach to the topic. If you've already discussed this, just point me to the right video and I'm good. And anyway, stay safe, everyone. It's a challenging time. Well, your thoughts there at the end are very much appreciated and shared by me as well. I think for the most part, it's just not addressed. I know that, I mean, there is evidence throughout the franchise, especially in TNG and Deep Space Nine, and now also it's been dealt with, I think, pretty well and certainly very prominently in Star Trek Discovery as well. Like that, there are people who still deal with mental health issues. It's not that everybody is always fine all the time. When people and I, to a certain extent, you would expect, no matter how good life is on Earth, no matter how much you have been able to solve the problems of poverty and hunger and things like that, if someone experiences trauma, you can expect that they will have some fallout from that and they will have to deal with that. And they might need counseling or some kind of medical intervention or something to help them deal with that, right? That's just, no matter how good life is generally, if something terrible happens to you, you could be in a position where you need some help dealing with it. And that's mostly what we see in Star Trek is people who have come through traumatic experiences. And that's what a lot of it has been in Discovery is people who have come through traumatic experiences and now they are trying to sort of find their way after that. And I think most of that has been done pretty well. And if nothing else, I appreciate the effort. But so I think we can say that that exists. But I would also assume that generally speaking, mental health needs are met in the Federation. Like I would guess that if someone does need a counselor or a therapist of some kind for their mental health, their emotional well-being, that sort of service is available and easy to find, and you don't have to pay for it because money doesn't exist in the Federation. So people who do have particular mental health needs are able to get those needs seen to. So I think we can sort of assume that things are generally speaking a lot better in that regard than they are for us presently in the real world. And we just don't see that very often because Star Trek is an adventure show and there's just not a whole lot of story revolving people who are happy and stable, and when they do have mental health needs that need to be seen to, they can go and have them seen to and it's not a problem. Like there's not a whole lot of drama there. But I think we can assume that that is probably the situation. Matthew, why doesn't Star Trek ever properly utilize their technology? All the way back in season 1 of TOS, we learned that the transporter can duplicate extremely complex mechanisms, living beings, for example. So why not use the things as miniature factories? Well, I think that there are a couple of things to think about there. First of all, yes, the transporter does duplicate Captain Kirk in an early episode of TOS, but the duplication is imperfect. And if it is not reversed, then Captain Kirk, both halves of him will die. So it's not like they just made two Captain Kirks and it was like, oh, we have two now, right? Like in that situation, he had to be reintegrated or he would die. Now, later on in TNG, we got the Riker split where that's what it did. It did make two perfectly fine exact copies of Will Riker, and they were both able to live separately with indefinitely. But in the original series, that's not what happened, and that was an accident. And it's not necessarily just because something works accidentally doesn't mean that you can reverse engineer that in such a way so that you can get it to reliably work that way every single time. I mean, maybe you could, but it's not a given that you could do that. And also I think I know it's implied, and maybe even established outright at one point or another that the replicators use technology very similar to transporters in terms of breaking matter down and putting it back together and rearranging it and things like that. So and we hear mention in Deep Space Nine, especially a couple of times, of things called industrial replicators, which sound kind of like factories. So we might be able to just assume that they do use that technology for manufacturing purposes. But again, as I said with the previous answer, we might not see that all that often in the show, because the show is there to tell us a story, not to just elaborate on every little detail about how this world works. It's there to tell us a story, and if there's no reason through the telling of the story to let us see, all the myriad ways that they're using transporter technology, then we're not going to see it, because that's not the point. Trooper Bear and Triker, are there any 1 or 2 episode guest stars you wish had become series regulars or recurring characters on any Star Trek shows? That's a good question. 1 or 2 episode guest stars that I wish had become series regulars. It might have been interesting to see a more consistently recurring, like, other Q, because we always see Q, the John Delancey Q, and we see other Q besides him pop in every now and then, but there's not like another Q that, like, to give Q like a nemesis, that we see. Maybe not every single time, the Q shows up, but every once in a while there's like, so we know there's like another Q out there that is his nemesis. That might have been interesting. I know they kind of did something like that with Lady Q, but it's not exactly what I'm talking about. What else? What else is a good one-off character who might have been a more interesting regular? I don't. I don't know. I don't know. I can't really think of anybody other than potentially an alternate Q. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what to do with that one. I can't think of anybody. And if anybody in the live chat has suggestions, go for it. I'm probably not going to see it because I'm focused on this, but I'm sure there are people with that are able to come up with better suggestions than I can. I'll give you one. Here's one I just thought of. Robert Picard, Jean-Luc's brother. He was only ever seen on screen in Family, and he's one of my favorite, definitely one of my favorite one-off characters, and just fantastic character and fantastic actor who played him. So maybe I'll go with Robert Picard. General Contact Unit Problem Child. I suppose you meet an artist you're a fan of and you realize that you kind of hate them and they feel the same way about you. So I'm a fan of speculative evolution, and my favorite project is about a planet populated entirely by avian dinosaurs. The other day on Reddit, I saw the creator complaining about people creating projects too similar to his based on this and other stuff he said in the past. I told him I think he's a thin-skinned prick. He responded by calling me a parasite because I post about his stuff so much. So now I don't know how to feel about the fact I still like his work and even still have artwork I've commissioned from him on display in this room, but dislike him as a person. It's not that I think he's an especially bad person. We just dislike each other. Steve, suppose you met Jonathan Frakes and you realized the two of you hated each other. What would you do with your Riker memorabilia and DVDs of the movies and episodes he directed or acted in? Well, if it was a situation like that, like you're describing, where it turns out that I dislike the person, I dislike the artist, but I still have the same appreciation for the art, and the art was something that really meant something to me, I doubt it would make a difference to me. Now, if it turned out that like Jonathan Frakes was, a serial killer or something, or like a child molester or something like just really like just off the charts awful, then yeah, that would make things difficult. Then it would be harder for me to just sort of shrug that off and be like, separate the art from the artist. Like that would be challenging. But if it turns out that he's just kind of a dick and we don't really get on very well, I can live with that. So that's the situation that that I'm sort of seeing in the question. It wouldn't be, that would not be a big deal to me. I mean, it would be a bummer. Don't get me wrong. Like, I can imagine how disappointed I would feel if I got to meet someone whose work had meant a lot to me personally, and we had the chance to interact, on a one-on-one level, and it turned out they were, not cool, and we didn't get along, and maybe we even disliked each other. Like, that would suck. That would be, really shitty, but I don't know if it would cause me to consider, getting rid of all their stuff that I had. I don't think it would in that situation. It would have to be something a little more extreme than that for me to feel like I had to do that. Ahoy, Erno. Hey, Steve, your whole series on where do we go from here? Do you actually believe any of this is going to happen, or is it just something you hope for? Because looking from the outside, your country is well and truly fucked. Democrats aren't doing anything meaningful to stop the descent into Nazism, and the Republicans, not to be defeatist, but if Biden continues to be this inept, 2022 and 2024 are going to the GOP, and since they're now openly opposed to the Republic, it might very well be your last elections. I'm truly afraid of seeing the most powerful nuclear country descend into actual fascism. And if that happens, climate change will kill us all. This is not good, and I don't have a question, only fear. You ask, do I think the things I talk about in Where Do We Go From Here are going to happen? I don't know. I think all of the proposals I make could happen. And that's kind of the point of that series, is to try and offer practical solutions. Not salute, because I mean, no matter how practical the solution and no matter how theoretically possible it is, it still needs to be done. Like there still need to be people, and in most cases politicians, who are willing to do it, who are willing to write a bill and vote on a bill, and in the case of a president, sign the bill into law. So it's not like I definitely think all of those things are going to happen, but they all could happen. I don't think I've talked about anything in one of those videos where I've offered a proposed, way forward that I thought, though, this is total fantasy. There's no way this could ever happen. I think all of the suggestions are things that could happen, but will they? I don't know. I mean, you're very right to point out never underestimate the ability of the Democrats to completely blow an advantage. I've said many, many times before, I am a Democrat. I would not be anything else, but the Democratic Party could fuck up a wet dream. You're never going to lose money betting against the Democrats. It's just the way it is. I wish it were not so. We urgently need for them to get their shit together and to do more than they are doing. So there's that. And yes, the Republican Party is scary. The Republican Party is incredibly scary. And beyond that, the fact that they do have a realistic chance of gaining seats in the next election, and of maybe even winning the next presidential election. Like, those are not remote possibilities. Those are very, very possible outcomes. And that is terrifying. It's terrifying that I live in a country where there is a mask-off, fascist, white supremacist, openly bigoted, openly anti-science political party that is, that the number one figure of which, Donald Trump, is a criminal, and an open, unapologetic criminal who routinely makes statements that are meant to destroy confidence and question the legitimacy of some of the most important institutions in our country. And that's their number one guy. And pretty much everybody on their side is totally fine with it. They're like, yeah, fuck it. We don't care. Right? Like, it's incredibly scary. It's incredibly scary and incredibly disappointing and frustrating and enraging. Like, it's a whole bunch of very negative things. So yes, I have fear as well. I mean, but yeah, the things I talk about in that series are all things that could be done. Do I think they will be done? Unfortunately, I think most of them probably will not be done, at least not in the very near future. But, it's not for implausibility or because I'm asking for too much. I really don't think I am. Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, a couple years ago, I saw the movie The Red Pill from former feminist Cassie Jaye. The film details the men's rights movement. It's a more positive view on the issues that men face, removed from the more misogynist elements. As a man, I do sincerely think that we have issues that don't get talked about. Men are either evil or they don't complain. As a person of color male, I do have issues described in my past Ask Away. Yet, one time I talked to a feminist about marriage and relationships. I think she is a limousine socialist, and she told me that women should be liberated from relationships. Yet, she is in a relationship with a man. As a man, I felt slightly irritated and a bit put off. I think that is why some men, especially some men with autism, join incel communities for support. I don't think they are all sexist, just lost and confused. Not that I'm giving any of them a pass or anything for being sexist, but I understand why some are in those communities. Thoughts? No, I think you're probably right. Yeah. I think communities like that definitely cater to people, men in this case, who feel adrift, who feel like they are not being listened to, or not understood. And you're completely right. It does not let them off the hook for any of the horrible stuff that they participate in or support. It doesn't let them off the hook for any of that. And it doesn't, and honestly, it doesn't, given how awful the things many of them end up supporting and participating in are, it doesn't really earn them a whole lot of sympathy for me either. But I do think that is an explanation. Yes, I completely agree with you there. And I understand why. I mean, I don't know the feminist you're talking about. I don't know the details of that conversation. I understand why it might be confusing if someone says women should be liberated from relationships, but she herself is in a relationship, which might seem like hypocritical. Maybe what she meant was that women should be liberated from the expectation that they need to be in a relationship in order to be whole or be what they're supposed to be or be their full selves, or whatever. The idea being that if you want to be in a relationship, if you find another person who makes you feel good and improves your life, and you are fulfilled by being in a relationship with them, then you should have the right to choose that, yes, and be happy. But there should not be an expectation placed on women or on anybody that, well, it's time to settle down, or it's time to find a nice man or a nice girl and get married, or like that sort of thing. People need to be liberated from. But if you meet someone and you hit it off and you fall in love and you decide that you want to be with them, you shouldn't not do that because, well, that's not liberated. Like that I think is kind of silly. And I don't know necessarily that that's what she was saying, but I'm just based on other arguments I've heard and other things that people have said. That would be one possible guess as to what she meant, but I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you that I think a lot of people find themselves being pulled into MRA communities and incel communities and MGTOW communities and stuff like that for exactly those sorts of reasons. Yes. And it sucks. It sucks. Lalo Sangel in the chat. Hi, Steve. Imagine you are sitting at your computer doing some mild file cleanup and humming a tune. You click on a mysterious file called Nomad. All of a sudden, your screen turns black, then starts to display gibberish all over. You start thinking that you have a virus infecting your computer when a weird robotic creature appears on the screen and says, "What is the meaning?" Then the creature zaps your brain through the screen until you pass out. When you wake up, you realize that everything you know about film and every movie you saw has been wiped from your memory. How should your loved ones help rebuild your film knowledge? What movies must you watch to rebuild your love and appreciation for great films? Should you watch the films in a particular order? And also, on that note, how did you become a film nerd? Well, I think I became a film nerd as a child and a teenager from watching Siskel and Ebert. That was probably the single most influential thing, was watching Siskel and Ebert every week and seeing these two guys talk intelligently about movies in a way that communicated to me that movies were important. That movies, yes, they were entertainment. They were something to watch and enjoy or not enjoy, as the case may be, but that movies as an art form were important and had a very large role to play in our culture, in our society, in our life experiences. And they were, to me, they were worth not just watching, but learning how to think about and talk about and communicate my feelings about. And what I was saying in the answer to the earlier question about what a critic is supposed to do. Siskel and Ebert, and specifically Roger Ebert, because in addition to watching them on the show, I also read his newspaper reviews very, very regularly. And so I think that was the number one thing that made me a film nerd. And what movies would I have to watch to rebuild my love and appreciation for great films? I think I would want to get back Buster Keaton pretty quick. I would want to get back Charlie Chaplin pretty quick. So, dump those in there, no particular order. Akira Kurosawa, Stanley Kubrick. I mean, we could just sort of go by directors and fill me back up on all my favorite directors, go for stuff like that. Of course, Star Trek movies, Star Wars, some of my favorite horror movies like George Romero's zombie movies, things like that. Clint Eastwood movies, my favorite Westerns. There are a couple of big ones that I would be like, oh, if I totally lost movies altogether, if movies were completely gone, like I would need this, and this. Mystery Science Theater, some of the so bad they're good movies that I love, like The Room and Roadhouse, like stuff like that. But the big ones would probably be Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Kubrick and Kurosawa, because those are my absolute favorites that have been among my favorites for as long as I've felt like I was someone who cared about movies. So I would need those back pretty quick if I was going to get back to where I was before this creature zaps my brain. David Colby, I've been rewatching some old movies I love, and man, they don't make conservative art like Die Hard anymore. Die Hard is a deeply conservative movie. The finale is literally read as the working woman has the symbol of her place in the corporate world pulled off her wrist by her heroic working class husband to kill the slickly dressed European villain. But despite the fact the movie's basically cops and conservative Reaganites are cool and the best foreigners are scary and the Japanese will eat us alive, it's deeply charming and fun and human. What the fuck happened, man? Why can't conservatives make anything anymore? They can't make music. They can't fucking make jokes. They can't make movies. They sure as fuck can't write books. They're terrible at reading things. You haven't even seen the weird comments I get on my stories from weird conservatives. What's the deal? Is the rot in their souls reaching their brain? Are they sucking down leaded water out of sheer stubbornness? Well, I mean, that last one may in fact be it. But I think a lot of it is that they project so reflexively, and they view more liberal and left-leaning media as being heavy-handed and shoving things down their throats and beating them over the head with things, even when it's not. Like, I don't think, I get this a lot from people who, they don't like the newer Star Trek shows. And they're like, I didn't like I like Star Trek back before it was so heavy-handed. Now the politics on the new shows, they beat you over the head with everything. Like, as someone who has watched all of Star Trek, right? And I'm not saying I'm like the unimpeachable expert on this. This is just my opinion, but I've seen every single episode of every Star Trek ever. All right. The new shows are way less heavy-handed politically than the old stuff. Like, it's not even close. It's not that the new stuff doesn't. I mean, obviously there are very, very obvious political themes in Discovery and in the first season of Picard. And I mean, they are clearly making comments of a political nature, but it's way less heavy-handed than it was in TNG and Deep Space Nine and certainly in classic Trek. Like, it's just, but a lot of conservative just reflexively, if they detect even the hint that they're being preached at, or the movie has a message that something about their beliefs or their way of life is wrong and should change for the betterment of the world. Like, they react to that so strongly. So when they make art, they put their point of view into their art just as strongly, just as stridently as they think the leftist or the liberal point of view is being put into that art that pissed them off, right? So I think what has happened with a lot of right-wing art in recent years is that it's not just like something like Die Hard, which has conservative themes, but you can watch Die Hard and not feel like you're being beaten over the head with a right-wing polemic, right? You can watch Die Hard just as a really great action movie and enjoy it, and you don't need to read it as what you described. But more recent conservative art, it's almost impossible to do that. Like, they are so preoccupied with getting their message across as strongly as they can, and they have such a chip on their shoulder about it that subsumes everything else. And it just makes it unwatchable, especially if you don't happen to share that point of view. But I mean, even if you do share that point of view, but you have any fucking taste at all, like, are you really going to watch what was the one with An American Carol from like 10 or 15 years ago that was like, about the Michael Moore character having a change of heart and going from being a liberal to being a conservative because he had like a Christmas Carol experience with George Washington as his Jacob Marley, taking him through American history. And, like, that's just garbage. I mean, even most conservatives who, had some film literacy saw that and were like, oh, Jesus, like, this is terrible. So, but yeah, I think that's a lot of it, is that they're so ideologically committed that they can't, they put that before everything else. They do what they think liberals and leftists are doing, which in many cases they're not, but they think they are. They perceive them as doing that, and it just gets in the way of everything else, and it destroys any chance that their art is going to have any appeal to anybody who doesn't just want to see their own ideology repeated in front of them. Neelix, what are your favorite recipes? Getting really bored with cooking at the moment. You know what? I mean, I do a lot of cooking, especially in the last year or so since I've been on my own. But I mean, I don't really have like favorite recipes. I'm sorry. I can't really help you. Like, I do things like, make rice and then make stir fry with it, or make noodles and then make stir fry with it, or, make like, I mean, I make bean burgers, like, meatless burgers that are made out of black beans, and recently I made some with lentils instead of black beans, and they were pretty good. Because I'm mostly a vegetarian, and during the week, if I want a burger, I don't just I can't just order something from McDonald's or whatever. Like, I can either get an Impossible Whopper from Burger King, or if I don't feel like that, I can make my own with some black beans or some lentils or whatever. And so that's a good recipe. I mean, I can't recite it for you right here, but it's you mash some black beans, you put in some panko crumbs and maybe an egg to hold it together. You put in some chopped onions and some steak seasoning, and maybe some Worcestershire sauce or A1 steak sauce to kind of give it a little bit more of a beefier flavor. And you just kind of go from there. Like, but no, I wish I had more recipes that I could share with you, but I really don't. Most of my cooking is fairly simple, and if there is and if it is the sort of thing that requires a recipe, it's something that I just kind of play it by ear, cook to taste, so to speak. Agent Meister, Peldor Joy, Stefano Tron. Oh, that's so like that. Don't call me that in real life, but I just finished rewatching Enterprise. The last time I did this was 10 years ago. I enjoyed it then, but I absolutely loved it now. It's not perfect. The Temporal Cold War was a big nothing burger, and don't get me started on that series finale, but things like Bakula's portrayal of Archer, T'Pol and Trip's final scene in Terra Firma, the season-long Xindi storyline, and the way the series sort of acts as a bridge between our world and that of TOS has made this series one of my favorite in Trek. And who could forget Porthos? I know you don't like Enterprise much and that you only ever watched it right through only once years ago, but would you consider giving it another go? I doubt it will surpass DS9 in your affections, but like me, you might enjoy some aspect of it that eluded you the first time around. On the other hand, you could just as easily end up disliking it more, so there's that. Also, do you ever get tired of people asking what you need with a starship? It is very, very nice. Yeah, I would watch Enterprise again. Sure. I'm kind of, actually, now that I think about it, I'm kind of surprised that I haven't done a rewatch. Maybe I'll try to start a rewatch of Enterprise in the next couple weeks. But no, there's no reason why I wouldn't want to do it other than I just haven't done it. Like it just hasn't occurred to me. But I was actually I put together I was putting together the poll for the February Trek Actually video because the polls are always like 2 months ahead. And I was trying to think of topics that would allow me to talk about Enterprise because Enterprise is the show that I have probably paid the least amount of attention to in the Trek Actually video. So I came up with a topic that would be a good Voyager topic and a good Enterprise topic and threw them in there with the others because I don't want to neglect Enterprise if I remember not to, you know. But yeah, so I could do a rewatch of Enterprise, and maybe I would come up with some more ideas for potentially great Trek Actually videos. So that would be another reason to do it. But yeah, I would totally do a rewatch of Enterprise. Maybe I'll start that sometime soon. Some random geek who is going to ask the worst kind of question that is technically a question, but still, I'm not excited about Christmas. I honestly feel a little anxiety about the chore of updating my wish list and trying to remember what I got last year or birthday, and then trying to figure out if I want anything. But capitalism needs us to shop, 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 shop for its exponential growth, after all, hence the commodification of the holidays, which reminds me of the holiday strike. If I remember correctly, the holiday strike, for those who can participate, is where you don't buy anything at the big box stores or major companies for holiday shopping. Instead, shop at local stores, especially minority owned stores, or make your own gifts to give to others. My own suggestion is what I do for Christmas and birthdays. I tell my family, don't buy me anything. Instead, give to my friends, Joanna or Phoenix, who are in poverty. Steve, what if those of us who are privileged say, don't buy me anything for the holidays, I don't want anything. Instead, give money or stuff to those in need? Thoughts? I think that's a great idea. Maybe I should start saying that instead of saying, don't get me anything. Maybe I should tell people, just make a donation to, and I'll suggest like a group, and I'll just make a donation to, give directly in my name. If you really feel the need to give me something for Christmas, then do that. Don't just give me something that I don't want or don't need. Make a donation in my name to some worthy cause that I can suggest. I think that's actually a really good idea. I should maybe start doing that instead. But yeah, I mean, like I feel everything you're saying, except I personally don't feel the pressure. Like I don't maintain a wish list. If people ask me if I want something for Christmas, I say no. And hopefully they're not pushy about it. Like, no, come on, man, don't be like that. Seriously, what do you want for Christmas? I don't want anything for Christmas. Don't get me anything for Christmas. Like, hopefully they're not like that about it, but yeah, for the most part, I completely get what you're saying there. It sucks, and I think if possible, participating in something like a holiday strike, where if you are going to do Christmas shopping, to try as much as possible to buy at locally owned stuff and minority owned businesses, I think that's a great idea too. But the bit about don't get me anything, donate to my friends GoFundMe or donate to this charity that I believe in or whatever, like that's I think that's a really, really good idea. Ian Z, Star Trek Prodigy is 100% a kid's show with some sophisticated themes like unjust imprisonment and escape, but it's an enjoyable watch. Not sure if you've seen it yet, but I recommend. The title sequence though, wow, chef's kiss. Best one yet. Discovery is neat, but mostly forgettable. Lower Decks is a fun intro, but it's a comedy, so it doesn't quite compare. Picard has decent music and pretty visuals, but Prodigy is like inspiring with its cool factor. Makes you want to be a space explorer, and I think it comes closest to stirring theme music. Picard's music is nice, but it's not like, let's go explore music. What do you think of the intros and how they compare to each other in this new batch of shows? I think my favorite intro of the current shows is Discovery, just because it's different. Like it was different. The intro to Picard is kind of similar to it. It's like it's a similar style. But yeah, I really like the Discovery opening theme, and I really like the, the montage, the sort of the artwork kind of, where they just show you kind of objects that symbolize the show. I like the way the theme builds and builds. I really, really like the Discovery opening. So I would say that's the best one for me. And it's not even close. Like I really liked, the Lower Decks and intro, and for the first season at least, I enjoyed the Lower Decks intro because I knew I could be guaranteed that I would at least be laughing at that, because I thought, there were times when, even in the first season, when I was still more on board with the show than I am now. Um, I had the problem of, well, this is a fun show, but it really isn't that funny. It's not really making me laugh. But there are parts in the opening title sequence of Lower Decks that for a while made me laugh every time I saw them. And when I stopped laughing at those bits in the Lower Decks intro, that was kind of a sign that I was moving off the show, when even the parts of the intro that used to kill me, where I was watching them and going like, I'm kind of over that now, you know. But initially I thought the Lower Decks, and still, like in theory, like I think the Lower Decks intro is terrific. And the others are fine. Like I like the Prodigy, and I haven't talked about Prodigy in a video yet. I might wait until, because they've only released 5 episodes so far, and I might wait until next year after they've released the next batch to do kind of a cumulative review video of maybe like the first half of the first season or something. But I thought I liked Prodigy so far. I enjoyed it. It's definitely a kids show. But I found it watchable. Like I watched, they did a kids version of He-Man on Netflix recently too, and I couldn't even get through one episode of that. Like I watched that, I watched like 3 minutes of that, and I was like, okay, I'm out. This isn't for me. Because it seemed like it was aimed at like 4-year-olds. Like, and I was just, no, that's not for me. I can't get into this. But Prodigy, even though it is obviously aimed at a younger audience, I still was able to get into it and enjoy it, and I thought it was, from what we've seen so far, I think it's pretty good. And yeah, the opening sequence is terrific. It's really good. But I think my favorite of the current shows is Discovery, as far as the opening sequences, and as far as everything else too. Discovery is my favorite of the current shows. Black Cover 95, continuing my Superman themed questions. Have you read The Metropolitan Man by Alexander Wales? If so, what did you think of it? If you haven't, I'd love to hear you review it another time. Also, what do you think of Superman Red Sun? Well, I haven't read The Metropolitan Man, unfortunately, so I can't give you any thoughts about that. And I read Superman Red Sun once a long time ago, and I remember really, really liking it, but I haven't read it for years and years and years. So I don't think I feel comfortable expressing any strong specific opinions about it. But I remember when I read it, I think I read it right after it came out in trade paperback. I wasn't reading it like, if it was coming out monthly, I wasn't reading it like that. I read it when it was in trade paperback. And at the time, I thought it was great. I know there's been an animated movie of it. I haven't seen that, so I can't speak to that. But I read the comic around the time that it was initially published and thought it was terrific. But it's been so long that that's really all I can say. So, Kier, Doom of Gloom, we're all going to die, and Godgul is saving 10 pieces of information from each person in its IARC for future alien inhabitants to read about us. What 10 things would you want to be remembered for? As always, keep up the work, good and otherwise. What 10 things would I want to be remembered for? I don't know. Just pick your favorites from the Stuffy videos and the Star Trek action figure comics. And maybe my best couple of Trek Actually videos, like what 10 things would I want to be remembered? So pick the best 10 things of my creative work. And if you're asking me to curate it, I mean, it would probably mostly be Stuffy videos with a couple of Star Trek videos thrown in there, because that's the YouTube work of mine that I'm the proudest of, especially the Stuffy videos. I think are my favorite work of mine. So those, and a couple of the better Star Trek videos maybe would go in there, I guess. I mean, what's it matter to me? I'm going to be dead. Like, what do I give? What do I care? But yeah, probably something like that. Scott P. So I've seen some discussion about the upcoming Lord of the Rings show on Netflix, namely concerns about the show being more adult in order to draw Game of Thrones fans over by using what some might say is gratuitous sex and nudity. While I'm not personally invested in either of these franchises and don't see anything inherently wrong about sex and nudity in fictional media, I began to wonder if I would feel the same if Star Trek took a similar turn. Trek is certainly no stranger to such things and has usually been more reserved in what is shown on camera. Even Discovery, the first Trek show unbound by traditional broadcasting standards, has shown a fair bit of restraint in this regard. So I guess my question is, should there be a limit to what kind of sexual content should appear in Trek? I'm not a prude by any means, but part of me feels like more frequent or explicit depictions of sex may feel out of place in the context of Trek's largely PC to PG-13 level of entertainment. No, I don't believe there should be any kind of preset limit, other than, if the show is meant to be shown on a network where there is like a pre-existing restraint that everybody has to deal with, and that's a different matter. But like, should the producers of the show, absent some other restraint, should they say to themselves, okay, let's keep this PG or let's keep this PG-13? Like that's up to them, and they should do that based on what they think is best for the story they're going to tell. I don't think Star Trek inherently needs to be PG or PG-13. And I think the main reason that it has been, for the most part, is that it's mostly been on network television. And there's just, or if not network television, syndicated television, which is still an over-the-air broadcast. And, there's just only so much you can get away with. And that restraint has shaped the show in that way. And shaped the franchise as a result. So, but do I think that Star Trek must remain PG or PG-13 in order for it to? No, I don't think that at all. I think as long as the story is good, I think as long as I'm invested in what's going on, as long as I care about the characters and I care about the situation, I don't give a shit whether Star Trek is more or less sexually explicit. I don't care whether they swear more or swear less, as long as they don't start using dumb, made-up Firefly swear words in place of actual profanity. Until that sort of thing is pointed out to me by someone else, it usually doesn't even occur to me. Like, I remember there was a scene a couple years ago, I think it was in the first season of Discovery, that a certain group of Star Trek fans just lost their fucking minds about. And it was like a really brief kind of flashback scene, just like a glimpse of a sex scene between two characters where you saw the woman's breasts. And I mean, it was just like, and the lighting was different, and it was sort of just a flickering, fleeting, like a flash of memory, right? And when I saw that, I didn't immediately go, oh my God, they put tits in Star Trek. Like, it didn't even occur to me like that. I didn't even think that there was anything, oh shit, Star Trek has tits in it now. Like, I probably had more of a reaction when Tilly said fuck for the first time, when Tilly dropped the franchise's first F-bomb, but even that, I didn't think that was like a huge deal. I might have been on the couch watching that going, oh, cool, good for them. But like, it wasn't a big deal. As long as the story is good, and as long as it doesn't seem gratuitous, because I agree with you. I mean, if it becomes a problem where it feels gratuitous, then that is an issue. But as long as it doesn't feel gratuitous, like, I don't care. I don't think it hurts the franchise just because it's mostly been PG or PG-13 up to now. Like, I honestly don't care about that. Tell the best story you can tell, the way you think it needs to be told. And if you, even absent some other external restraint, feel like you can tell the story best if you don't see the characters fucking and they're not, saying fuck and shit all the time, then tell the story that way. That's great. Tell the story the best way you can tell it. And if it turns out to be rated PG or R or whatever, personally, I don't give a shit as long as it's a good story. John Burns. Hey, Steve, hydrate. So who's the more despicable human being, Hitler or Bill Cosby? I know when they were going to be teamed up on that Whose Line Is It Anyway, Hitler was leading the most despicable human by a wide margin, but we just weren't aware of what was going on. But in the intervening years, and the fact that Bill Cosby was released from jail on a technicality, which was that the prosecutor was a moron, things have moved in a very different direction. What do you think? Well, I feel like I must preface this by saying fuck Bill Cosby, and if there is a hell, I hope he goes there when he dies, which will also hopefully be soon. I don't think he should have been let out of prison. I you know I think he's a monster. I believe he did the things he is accused of doing, and I think prison is the place he belongs. I think he's a horrible, evil human being. But it's obviously Hitler. Like, I mean, it's obviously Hitler, taking nothing away from the atrocious crimes of Bill Cosby, taking nothing away from those. Hitler not only did the Holocaust, he imposed a dictatorship on the entire country of Germany. He militarized the entire country of Germany. He did the Holocaust. And he started World War II that got tens and tens of millions of people all over the world killed in the war, plus the 6 to 10 million that were killed in the Holocaust. Like, it's clearly Hitler. It's Hitler. Hitler's worse. Hitler's worse. But Bill Cosby is still a piece of shit. So I don't want to feel like I'm minimizing the crimes of Bill Cosby here. But it's obviously Hitler. Dana Cole, in the system where I teach, we have a whole nother week with students, plus then the following Monday and Tuesday. Some of my students are working hard to improve their grades. Others don't seem to care or have given up. I could really use some positive thoughts. What is the most useful thing you remember learning in your K through 12 education? Well, I basically learned how to cook in my middle school home economics classes. Like in middle school, we had to take home ec every year from 6th through 8th grade. And that's where I learned how to run a stove, how to work an oven, how to make, how to fry an egg, which I'm still really goddamn good at, by the way. How to make a grilled cheese, how to make snickerdoodles, like just how to bake basic things and how to cook basic things. Just the sort of simple skills that are involved in cooking at just with a baseline of competence. I learned that during the course of my K through 12 education. So that, for my practical life, like that's a big one, just learning basically how to cook and also how to sew. I learned that again in home ec, right? I sewed the patch on this hat. I still sew everyone, not frequently, but every once in a while, if I have to sew something, like I know how to do it and do it fairly well. I learned that in school. So that's important. On a more creative approach, I learned the basics of how to write in 7th and 8th grade. And not just how to write like actual, make my letters and stuff, but how to compose, how to write fiction, how to find my voice as a writer. That process continued and I got a lot better as the years went on, but that process started in 7th and 8th grade with my English teacher in 7th grade, Mrs. Daniels, and my English teacher in 8th grade, Mr. Cromwell. Like those are two of the most important people in my entire life ever. Because not only did they teach me how to write, but they gave me the freedom, and because of the curriculum at the time, they were allowed to give me the freedom to explore my own writing, to figure out what I wanted to write about, how I wanted to write, how to express myself, how to tell stories, how to put things across on the page in a way that would be meaningful to someone else. Like if not for those two people in 7th and 8th grade, like that just would not have happened for me. So I learned that. Like I not only learned how to write, but I learned that writing was something that I wanted to do and that I could be good at. And that I wanted to be good at and wanted to be better at than I was. Like that, I learned that from my English teachers in middle school. and continued to learn it and be reminded of it through high school as well. I didn't have as many English teachers in high school that were like super important and formative to me in the ways that Mrs. Daniels and Mr. Cromwell were. But I had a couple. I was lucky in that way. So yeah, probably that. Probably those things. Cooking and writing are two things that I think I can credit to my K through 12 education, and I would not be the same person without them. Matthew Maeda, hi Steve. Been a while since I did this, but I have a nagging question. During the TNG episode about Tin Man, there were two scenes where LaForge was working in engineering and calls out to Russell to help him with something. Who is Russell? He doesn't have any lines and never was addressed by his rank, just his first name. The scenes always looked a bit awkward. Was it like a cameo spot for someone famous, like the Crown Prince of Jordan in Voyager? No. Russell was just a random crew member for Geordi to talk to. But there is an interesting story about Russell, and I'm glad you asked this question, and I looked it up on Memory Alpha, because it turns out the actor who played Russell on TNG in the 90s, and also later played a character who was never named but is kind of assumed to be the same character or supposed to be the same character in Voyager. I guess they transferred from the Enterprise D to Voyager at some point. And even if they're not supposed to be the same character, it doesn't matter because it's just a background character. They never have any lines, as you say. They never have anything really meaningful to do in the episode. It's just a background character for Geordi in this case to talk to be a member of Geordi's staff in engineering. But the actor who played Russell, after Star Trek went off the air, came out as trans and was playing a male character and was presenting as male at the time, but it turns out that she is a trans woman, and her name is actually Debbie David, and I don't think she does a lot of acting these days, but she's still around, she's still alive, and still sort of doing things in Hollywood. And doing things in the trans community and the queer community. But yeah, Russell, the engineer that Geordi talks to in that episode and that is seen in the background of several episodes of TNG and of Voyager, was played by an actor who, it turns out, came out as trans many years later. So that's I had no idea about that, and it's just a really nice discovery to make when you asked that question. I was like, what is the deal with Russell? But yeah, that's the deal with Russell. The character itself is not important, but it's a nice little tidbit about the diversity of the Star Trek cast that I think a lot of people at the time probably didn't even know. But it turns out Russell was played by an actor who came out as trans some years later. So there you go. Next question is from Lord Eric Allen the First. Oh, nice, moving up in the world. The ruler of Allentown, by the way, everybody. So let's pay the proper respect. All right, Steve, you are the captain of the USS Deplorables. Your crew consists of Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Bill Maher, and Ben Shapiro. Of them, who do you assign to be your first officer, chief engineer, communications officer, helmsman, and science officer? P.S. You cannot set auto-destruct. It has been disabled, and the navigation system won't allow you to fly into a star or black hole or whatever. You must suffer with this crew. Sorry, man. Anyway, I hope you're well and enjoying life, and I hope you never find yourself in the presence of those assholes. You're too good of a person to even have to tolerate them in your presence. Be well, my friend. P.P.S. Got any more land I can annex? Man, you can have Hagerstown anytime you want it. Like, send the troops from Allentown down here and annex Hagerstown. You can have it. I feel like I can speak for the entire population of the area. It's yours. Oh boy. I mean, I would make Ben Shapiro the chief engineer because his incompetence would destroy the ship in a few days anyway. And then I could hop in an escape pod and get the hell out of there. Like, what's the difference? Like, well, gee, Jordan Peterson, he might be a good first officer, but then again, Bill Maher, like, who gives? It's like, Slightly different flavors of terrible, terrible ice cream is what you're giving me. Like, I would make Ben Shapiro. I would Ben Shapiro and his clueless, peevish, completely unfounded confidence and arrogance, and in a position as important and as vital to the operations of the ship as chief engineer, would guarantee that the ship would break down in a matter of days, if not hours, and we would all have to get the fuck out of there. And then my nightmare would be over. So I don't care what jobs the rest of them have; they can fight with each other over it. They would all want to try to be the captain anyway. But I would assign young Mr. Shapiro to engineering, and his incompetence would see to it that I would be out of there in no time. So that's what I would do. Joe McClory, work continues to be harder than it should be, and as time passes, it is harder to stay compassionate and professional, but being angry and short with the patients and my coworkers does not help anyone. Any tips for keeping your cool and staying professional while you're just not feeling work? I mean, I can't tell you anything specific, unfortunately, but I would say, count to 10, take a breath, take a step back, try to stay in the moment, you know, try as best you can to not let yourself get carried off and fly off the handle. I mean, I know it's much easier said than done. And when you are in an incredibly frustrating situation and you're kind of at the end of your rope to begin with, you can't always just stop and take a breath and calm down. You don't always think to do that. You're just caught up in the moment. But if you can, I would highly suggest doing that. And even if you have the opportunity to just step away from everybody for a few seconds and just take a breath, count to 10, be in the moment, right? That's kind of an actor thing, but I think that it helps in real life too. Like, remind yourself of where you are and when you are and who you are and what the circumstances are, and just be in the moment. Pull yourself back to the moment and go, okay, I can do this. I can get through this. I'm not going to get fired today. I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'm not going to kill anybody. I can control this. I can control myself. I can't control what happens around me, but I can control myself, and I can control how I respond to things. And I'm going to try to respond to things in the best way possible for me, first of all, and for the people that I can affect around me, second of all. And that's, I apologize for that being not terribly useful advice, but I feel like there's really not any super useful advice I can give you other than just, try to come back to the moment if you find yourself in that sort of a situation. And I feel for you, and, I wish I could do more to help, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope things get better soon. Yeah. Matthew Datcher says, it looks like our Maryland legislature has released their proposal for the new congressional district map. And then there's a link to it, which I looked at before the show. It seems that the controversy is that there was the opportunity to gerrymander the state to be 8-0 against the Republicans, but instead made it 7-1. Considering the state is already heavily gerrymandered to the left, a 5-3 split would be far more equitable to the voters here. Is taking the opportunity to shut out the Republicans a wise choice? Personally, I believe that the Democrats need to remain above reproach in order for them to fight the ridiculous gerrymandering in other locations. I agree with you intellectually, and I am against gerrymandering no matter who does it. But I can't honestly say that I'm that. I will say this. I'm not mad at them for not gerrymandering it to their advantage even more. Like, I'm fine with a 7-1 split as opposed to an 8-0 split. Like, I'm not upset about that. But I'm also not upset that they didn't go 5-3. Like, I know in my mind, I know intellectually that might be a more fair map. And I oppose gerrymandering. I think partisan gerrymandering should be done away with completely. I don't think legislators should be allowed to draw their own congressional districts. I just think that's obviously a conflict of interest, and it's wrong, and it should never happen. I think there should always be either an independent commission, or the court should be empowered to do it, or there should be some entity other than the legislative body itself that should have the responsibility to determine the district lines. Like so in that way, I oppose it. But practically speaking, especially because the Republican Party is such a nightmare, like I'm not going to lose any sleep over the fact that Maryland is still going to be an overwhelmingly Democratic state in terms of our congressional delegation. And to be honest, if they had made it 8-0 instead of 7-1, I wouldn't have cared about that either. I mean, I would have cared about it intellectually. I would have thought, I still oppose gerrymandering, but I would not be wasting my breath taking like of all the things to fuss at the Democrats over. Like that would be very, very near the bottom of the list. But like I say, I mean, intellectually, morally, I agree with you. But personally, emotionally, do what you got to do. The Republican Party is a nightmare. The Republican Party is trying to, to destroy everything that we see. And so I'm not going to fuss at Democrats for gerrymandering. I would like to get rid of it across the board, but as long as it exists and it is a tool in the toolbox that they can use, I'm not going to fuss at them for using it. And finally, last question, or no, not last question, second to last question. I think. Yeah, second to last question. Second to last question from Madeline. Hi, Madeline. The discussion about Borg that happened during the last Askaway got me thinking. Picard and Cisco obviously have vastly different command styles and general perspectives on life. Picard is by the book and follows his morals at all times, while Cisco is someone who is willing to violate almost any reg in order to save the people he cares about. For me personally, Picard's decision to not destroy the Borg in Borg was indefensible. This is the Borg, pre-Voyager wussification, an existential threat that must be destroyed by any means necessary. It is not the time to be sitting on your huge carpeted office contemplating morality. Contrast Picard's approach to the Borg to Cisco's approach with the Dominion. Cisco did some pretty morally sketchy things to ensure that the Federation won. Everything that happened in the pale moonlight being a good example. Which brings me to my question. Would the Federation have won the Dominion War if Picard had been in command of Deep Space Nine? Well, I mean, from an outside perspective, of course the Federation would have, because it's a Star Trek show, and the Star Trek writers aren't going to write that, the good guys lose the war, especially and make it be Captain Picard's fault. I guess it depends on how important you think the Romulans joining the war was, because in the pale moonlight brings the Romulans into the war on the Federation side, and that is depicted as being like kind of a turning point. And it was Cisco's and Garrick's maneuvering behind the scenes and their, morally questionable things that got the Romulans to join the war effort. And I don't think Picard would have done the same things that Cisco does in that episode, but it's possible Picard might have tried some other tactic that would have gotten the Romulans in. Maybe Picard had connections in the Romulan Empire that Cisco didn't have, and maybe he wouldn't have had to resort to such nefarious methods. Maybe he could have gotten the Romulans to join the war in another way. So, I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that the Federation, again, pretending that this is all real, and not just bowing to the fact that no matter who was in charge of the station, the Federation would have won the war because it's a make-believe show and they would have written it that way. But pretending that it's real, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the Federation would have lost if Picard had been in charge. I mean, we do see, even though, yes, his morals are a lot more rigid than Cisco's, and he seems a lot less willing to get his hands dirty in that way, but Picard is still depicted as a brilliant commander and a brilliant diplomat, and a great leader in many ways. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they would have lost if Picard had been in charge. I think maybe it would have gone differently, or the tactics would have been different. But I think they still could have won. But I agree with you about Borg. I've thought for a long time that it would have been a more interesting way to go in terms of Picard's character and just in terms of the way the narrative progressed after that in the wider franchise. We would have had to sacrifice Star Trek First Contact the Borg wouldn't have been there for that, and that would have been a shame because First Contact was the best of the TNG era movies by far, and one of the best Star Trek movies just in general, I think. But, you know, it would have provided, like, if Picard had sent Hugh back with that virus and they had just destroyed the Borg, it would have wrapped up the Borg in a nice, neat package, would have explained why we don't see the Borg anymore. It would have saved the writers from the temptation of bringing the Borg back again and again and again and again and weakening them every single time they came back and lost to our heroes, which is exactly what happened in Voyager. The Borg kept coming back. They kept losing, and pretty soon it's like, oh, I guess the Borg are just another species now. Like, they went from being the most terrifying threat in the history of the Star Trek franchise to, oh, it's just another guy. It's the Borg. They're fine. We'll beat the Borg. We always beat the Borg, right? That's what happens when you keep bringing them back again and again and again, and they keep losing, right? And that's what happened. But if they had killed the Borg off with iBorg, you would have saved all of that, and you would have done it in such a horrible way where the captain of the show has to compromise his principles in a way that, yes, I mean, saves the Federation, defeats an existential threat, but is also totally an act of genocide. Like, he wipes out an entire species of billions and billions of individuals. There's so much story there. Like, because you have a captain responsible for that monstrous act, but the threat posed by that group was so enormous that you can make an argument that he had to do it. So it's clearly the more interesting way to go in terms of storytelling and in terms of Picard's characterization, because now he has to live with that. Like, that sticks with him. That means something to him. He can't just shrug that off. He's Picard. That would weigh on him, you know? So it was the more interesting way to go in terms of story and in terms of character, and it was a much better way to go with the Borg because you wrap them up in a nice, neat bow and say, okay, awesome villains, we love the Borg, thanks for the great episodes, and now we don't have to keep bringing you back and ruin you, you know, which is ultimately what happened. So yeah, I'm with you on iBorg totally. But as far as the rest of the question, I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that they would have lost the war. And finally, from Russell, hey Steve, sorry for the question. Hopefully I had enough time to squeeze this in there. Just finished watching the second 5-parter of He-Man, and well, I'll wait to talk about that to let people have a chance to watch it first. So back to my NYPD Blue. It's been a while. I did complete the second season of my rewatch of the show. I've also been watching season 3. Season 2 is mild compared to season 3, I think. There's some good moments in season 2, nothing to write home about, but my favorite season 3 episode so far during my rewatch is the Blackboard Jungle, where we meet Quasi, same actor who played Tuvix, by the way. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts of the episode, and what are your thoughts in general of Fancy versus Sipowicz regarding the racial differences? To me, I thought both James McDaniel and Dennis Franz did amazing jobs portraying those roles. Anyways, I look forward to hearing your response. Thank you, Stephen. Happy holidays, in case this is the last stream. I think I have another one before the holidays. I think the next one is Christmas Eve. So there'll be another Ask Away before the holidays. But, oh yeah, Fancy and Sipowicz, especially in the earlier seasons, I thought the Fancy and Sipowicz stuff was fantastic. And that episode is a great episode. That's the episode where Sipowicz drops the N-word, I think, isn't it? And he has the argument with Fancy where he says, I wasn't saying it. He said it to me first, and I was throwing it back at him. And Fancy says, you don't get to throw that back. Fancy, for anybody who doesn't know, Fancy is the lieutenant of the detective squad in NYPD Blue, and he's black. And Sipowicz is white and is racist. And so there's a lot of tension between the two of those. And and that's what Sipowicz's excuse was. He said, yeah, I said the N-word to the guy, but he said it to me first. I was just throwing it back. And Fancy says, you don't get to do that. Like, that's not an excuse. You don't get to say that word, period. And this isn't like 1994, 1995, right? So, great episode, great moment, great stuff always between Fancy and Sipowicz. And yeah, James McDaniel and Dennis Franz always did a great job in general, and especially when they got to play against each other and have their characters bounce off of each other like that. It was amazing. an amazing. I love Fancy and Sipowicz. And when Fancy leaves the show, he has that nice moment with Sipowicz, where they have kind of a make peace moment, where because Sipowicz has grown as a character, and they have a nice little farewell there before Fancy leaves the show. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Fancy and Sipowicz. So that is the last of the pre-submitted questions from patrons and channel members. So I will now turn to all of my friends who are with me in the live chat. Let's see what's going on in the old live chat. Kirak 2011 says it would have been wrong to send Hugh back to the Borg with that virus. Well, yeah, I mean, from a certain perspective, it would have been. That's one of the reasons why I think that would have been the much better, would have been a much more interesting way to go with the show. Have the hero do something wrong, but for what they feel is the right reason, especially if it's something really wrong that has catastrophic consequences, but catastrophic consequences that save his world. Like, that's a really interesting place to go for a story. John Burns has a super chat that says, did David Colby skip over many of the scenes with Bonnie Bedelia in them? She has to negotiate with Alan Rickman. What idiot put you in charge? You did when you murdered my boss. Ballsy. Well, yeah, I don't think I mean, I don't think the conservative reading of the film necessitates that you ignore Holly's character. I still think what David is reading as the conservative bent of the movie is a valid way to read that, but that doesn't mean that she's not. I mean, but let's also remember, like, yeah, she's an empowered character in certain ways, but she's there to be a hostage. Like, she's there to be the wife that the male hero saves. So she's not that empowered of a character, but she does get some nice one-liners off against Alan Rickman for sure. Matthew Datcher says, caption for the recent Massey pick, which is the congressman who took the Christmas card picture of his family and they're all holding guns. What does a congressman need with an M60? In the voice of Kirk from Star Trek V. And isn't that a great question? What does a congressman need with an M60? And the answer, of course, is the same answer as what does anybody who is not a soldier in a war zone right now need with an M60? Absolutely nothing. Nobody should have one ever for any reason. Unless you are fighting a war right now, you should not have one in your hands. Or in your house, or in your possession in any sense. Joe McClory says, is there any movie or TV show you could unsee if you could? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything that I've watched that, well, maybe, I don't know. Let me see. I can't really think of anything I've seen that I honestly wish I had not watched it. Like, even stuff that I thought was terrible, there is a really, really, really awful, super low budget horror movie called Trilogy of Blood that was actually made around here. It was made in southern Pennsylvania, more or less in my area. That is just fucking dog shit. Like, it's absolute dog shit. By the way, Andrew, 100%. No bastard needs a gun, period. I am 100% with you on that. Agreed. Could not agree more. But anyway, yeah. Trilogy of Blood is absolute dog shit and has no redeeming qualities, and there's really nothing interesting about it. So I might say that I mean, it's not like it's haunted me or anything, but when I think about it, I'm like, it's such a shitty movie. But it's, yeah, I can't really think of anything that was like so bad that I've thought I wish I had not watched that. Super chat from Kirak 2011 says, yeah, Steve, Blackboard Jungle is the episode where Andy drops the N-word and gets removed from the case. He also insults a Jewish reporter on his faith. Yeah, boy, that Detective Simplewitz, what a character. God, it's such a great episode. Such a great episode. And another super chat from Stephen G. Clenard. Thank you very much, my friend. Says, a lot of directors fall into a rut making the same sort of film over and over. Do you think the Wachowski sisters and the Coen brothers ought to swap scripts? I'd watch those movies. Ooh, a Matrix movie directed by the Coens? I would totally watch that and get the Wachowskis back to maybe some kind of a pulpy crime story like they did earlier with Bound. Yeah, that's actually kind of a neat idea. I can totally see that because we know the Wachowskis have an aptitude for Coen-esque type stuff because Bound is a really good movie. And I would be interested to see what the Coens would do with like an action movie with elements of sci-fi like The Matrix. So that's a really interesting suggestion. Yeah. Another one from Kirak 2011, thank you very much, says, what gets me more about that episode is what Andy says later and what Simone does to cover for his partner. When Andy said, low-life homies acting their color, just a powerful episode throughout. Oh, boy, that is a great scene. Yeah, that is a great scene. When Simone says, I need you to know that when you talk like, when I hear you say that, it tells me I can't talk to my partner. So like Simone covers for him professionally, but then lets him know privately, like, I am not okay with that, and when you talk like that around me, that tells me that I can't trust you, or I can't feel close to you as a partner when you talk like that. Yeah. Oh, the whole thing is a great episode. It's such a great episode. Super chat from Eric Allen. Steve, does it piss you off as much as it pisses me off that Homicide: Life on the Street isn't available for streaming anywhere? What the fuck? It does piss me off. It does. But the blow is softened slightly by the fact that I have the entire series on DVD. So if I really want to watch an episode of Homicide, I can watch it on DVD. Now, I would much prefer to have it on some streaming service that I subscribe to in glorious HD, where I could watch it and it would be crystal clear and beautiful and look better than I've ever seen it look before. Yes, I would love that. And I don't really get why I'm shocked that it's not on Peacock. Like, Peacock is the big NBC streaming series, and Homicide was on NBC for like 7 years. And I'm not sure. I think Universal owns the rights to it. I'm not positive, but anyway, I'm surprised it's not on Peacock. But yes, I would love to see Homicide on a major streaming service. God, Homicide, again, talk about cop shows. Homicide is such a great show. Jesus Christ, Homicide is a great show. And another super chat from John Burns, who says, which cop crime shows have you seen? Going back a bit, but Hill Street Blues, Homicide: Life on the Street, The Wire, The Shield. Believe it or not, I have never actually sat down and watched The Wire. That is on my list to watch, but I have never actually watched The Wire. And I have not seen very much of The Shield either. But I've not seen all of Hill Street Blues, but I've seen some of Hill Street Blues. I've seen all of Homicide. I've seen all of NYPD Blue. I've seen a good chunk of the middle of the original Law and Order. I never really got into the spinoffs. I've never seen very much FCU or Criminal Intent or the other Law and Order spinoffs, but I saw about the middle 6 or 7 years of the original Law and Order in the 90s, and was a big fan of that too. So those are the big ones of the cop shows that I've seen. Opinions no one cares about. Come on, level with us. It was you who set the Fox News Christmas tree on fire, wasn't it? It was not, but that might have been worth the train ride up there to do that. Yeah. 255 AD says, thoughts on smoking bans. New Zealand is talking about banning smoking for people born after 2008, and I was annoyed to see normally pro-drug legalization leftists applauding the idea. I honestly have no problem with smoking bans. I'm not going to get all worked up about it. Like I I think that drugs should be decriminalized, and I don't think that drugs should be the reason that people are sent to prison for years and years of their life, you know. But I'm not like a huge drug legalization person. I don't think that, you know, narcotics and drugs and habit forming drugs are good things that we should allow to sort of, you know, become even more widely used in our society than they already are. Like I think they should be treated as a medical problem, as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. But, you know, if somebody wants to ban smoking, like I see no problem with that at all. I'm not upset about that. Um, Especially when you consider the issue of secondhand smoke and the fact that if you smoke openly, like it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you as well. Like no, I'm completely fine with banning smoking completely. As long as you think it'll work. Like there are practical concerns where they say like, well, if you ban it, then it'll just go underground and it'll make it might not actually result in fewer people smoking. Like, assuming all of that has been worked out and there's a reasonable expectation that the result will be that it will just, you know, completely kill off the smoking habit for most people, like I'm completely fine with that. I'm completely fine with that. Kemp Chalmers with a super chat says, can you account for your whereabouts when the Fox News tree burned down? I can't actually, because I'm not sure exactly what had happened. I just saw it on Twitter. So I don't know exactly when it happened. It was a couple of days ago, right? Pedro Noguera says, I watched Akiru and it brought me to tears. It's probably my favorite Kurosawa movie, or maybe Dreams. Could you recommend other contemplative and beautiful movies like those? Oh, I'm so glad you liked it. Akiru is my favorite Kurosawa movie and one of my favorite movies, period. I love Akiru so much. It moves me to tears too. It's just, I mean, it's a great movie. Takashi Shimura is one of my favorite actors ever. He's so great in that movie. If you liked Akiru and you're looking for another movie like that, I can recommend another movie by a great Japanese director. There's a movie that came out a little bit before Akiru, I think, directed by the great Yoshihiro Otsu, called Tokyo Story, that is very similar in terms of tone and theme and whatnot to Akiru. And if you have not seen Tokyo Story, I would highly recommend that you check that out. And actually, a lot of Otsu's work is like that. He did another movie. His other famous movie besides Tokyo Story is a movie called Floating Weeds, which is also very similar. And if you haven't seen that, I would recommend that too. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Jacob Monroe asks, will you watch the revival of Law and Order? I might. I don't know. We'll see. Like you can tell I'm not like super committed to it, but like I don't know, I might. We'll see. It depends what else is on at the time, or you know, if it seems like it'll grab my interest. Dana asks, who is my favorite female director? I didn't list any when listing what made me a film nerd. Well, no, I mean, I think that's part of the inherent sort of sexism of the movie industry, unfortunately, is that there aren't, especially when I was growing up, there were not that many prominent female directors. Now I can name a few. Like I really love, even though she hasn't directed that much, but I really love Cassie Lemons. She directed a beautiful movie in 1997 called Eve's Bayou that is still one of my favorite films. Catherine Bigelow is terrific. Catherine Bigelow is one of those directors that like you see her do like a really, really great movie more recently, and then it makes you go back and watch her older stuff and you realize, oh shit, she's always been this good. Like I watched her more recent movies in the last 10, 15 years or so, the ones that really put her on the map as like an important artistic director, were The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, but both of which are fantastic. But you watch those and you're like, holy shit, this is like, you know, this is an amazingly talented director. And then you go back and watch like Point Break, and you're like, holy shit, I always thought this was kind of just like a cheesy, so bad it's good movie, but this is actually really fucking good. Like, especially as an action movie In terms of the direction, like she is just an amazing action director, Catherine Bigelow. So she's on my list. Random Geek says Patty Jenkins. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Patty Jenkins other than the Wonder Woman movies, but yeah, I mean she's good, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Who else? Who did Birds of Prey? I know Kathy Yan. Was Kathy Yan the screenwriter? No, Kathy Yan directed it, and Christina Hodson wrote it. So Kathy Yan directed Birds of Prey, and I mean she's obviously incredibly talented. So there's a few for you, but I mean, it's unfortunately due to the sexist nature of the movie industry, it's much more difficult to name prominent female directors than it should be, and that is definitely changing. But there's still quite a ways to go. 255 AD says, how do you feel about Voyager letting a hereditary monarch buy a cameo? I just found out about that from the Ensign Russell question, and I think it's kind of bullshit. Well, I mean, if it was my show, I wouldn't do it. I don't think I'm not a big fan of that. Like, I'm not a big fan of allowing people to buy cameos on TV shows, regardless of whether they're, a hereditary monarch. And I just don't think that's a very good practice. Like, that's a spot. Even if it's just a nothing part, even if it's just like, oh, they're just in the background, or they're working a transporter console or something, like that's a role that an actual proper actor could have done. Like, that's a job. You took a job from somebody, you know like there are people who are background actors, who are extras, who that's their job. Like, they do that for a living, and you took that spot from somebody who could have used that. So I'm generally not in favor of that practice. So I'm against it, is what I'll say. I'm not for it. I'm against it. Super chat from Keurig 2011. Speaking of Catherine Bigelow, have you seen Near Dark? Love that movie. Yes. Oh, Near Dark is a great movie. Yes. Thank you for bringing that one up. Jacob Monroe says in another super chat, thank you, Jacob, is it time to ban horse racing? Another high-profile horse, Medina Spirit, died. What kind of sport has the athletes dying on a regular basis? Well, I would love to see horse racing banned. I'm completely on board with you with that. Yeah, I think it is time to ban horse racing for sure. For sure. And I had not heard that. I don't follow horse racing, so I did not know that another high-profile horse had died. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's time to ban horse racing. Carlisle the Cinephile with a chuper with a chuper a chuper chat. A super chat. Thank you, Carlisle. Says, are you excited about Spider-Man No Way Home? I'm both looking forward to it and dreading it because I'm scared it'll be overcrowded and unnecessarily convoluted, which seems to be the curse of third Spidey movies. Yes, that is, I mean, overcrowded especially is a concern given how many characters are going to be in it. But I am super excited about it. I'm actually, I guess it'll be a week from today. I'm going to see it in the theater. I'm going to go see it opening day in the theater. It'll be the first time I have gone to a movie theater since before the pandemic. And what got me out of the house to go to a movie theater during a pandemic? Spider-Man. I'm very much looking forward to going and seeing Spider-Man No Way Home. I am super excited about it, yes. But I cautious optimism because, yes, your concerns are very valid. Another super chat from John Burns says, why doesn't anyone in the United States have any faith in the Constitution? If you don't have faith in the Constitution, are you simply arguing that might makes right? City fathers of Carthage? I don't think it's necessarily that people don't have faith in the Constitution. It's just that a lot of people who claim to be upholding it haven't actually read it. And they haven't really internalized the fact that, yes, the Constitution says what it says, but we also designed it so that we can change it. Like, it's meant to evolve over the years. It's not meant to be treated as something that was chiseled into stone and it can never change. Like, we're supposed to be changing it and perhaps even reinterpreting it as the years go by and generations come and go, So I don't think it's always so much that people don't have faith in the Constitution. It's just that, they're not as familiar with it as they think they are or want people to think they are. Dana, this is great. Are the Borg the Trek version of the Joker? I would say, yeah. I would say they are in terms of overexposure and in terms of, being the characters that just should not be brought back unless someone has a really, really good idea, right? In terms of overexposure, I think the Borg are even worse than the Joker, but yes, same situation. Overexposed, overused, um, you know, very much diluted from their most powerful appearances, and just should probably be put on the shelf. In the case of the Borg, should just be put on the shelf permanently and just should never be brought back. And in the case of the Joker, should be put up on the shelf for a really, really nice long time. Let him go away so we have a chance to miss him, and then bring him back. If some writer comes up with a really fantastic idea for a Joker story, then yeah, bring him back and do another Joker story. But I mean, failing that, just, you know, let Batman do some other stuff for a while, right? Super chat from Kirok 2011 says, I think I missed your answer, but have you seen the film Enemy Mine? If so, what are your thoughts on the film? I recently watched it and it still gets. No, I like it. That's the one with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr., right? Yeah, and that's a really good movie. That's one of those movies that used to be on TV like on Saturday afternoons when I was a kid, on like one of the independent TV channels. And I've seen that movie in bits and pieces. I've seen that movie more times than I can remember. And yeah, it's a really good movie. Another super chat from Carlisle. Thank you very much once again, my friend, for your generosity. It says, I'm also scared that no matter how good it is, the toxic fanboys will pitch a fit if it doesn't match their fan theories exactly. Like, what if Maguire and Garfield really aren't in it? It'll be The Last Jedi all over again. Yeah, I mean, I confess, if Tobey Maguire isn't in it, I will be a little disappointed, but I don't think if the movie is otherwise a great movie, it's not going to stop me from liking the movie. And I'm not going to like complain about it or give it a bad review or be like, oh, I wish Tobey was in it. I thought Tobey was going to be in it. The movie sucks. Like I would really like for Tobey Maguire to be in it, just because I'm a huge fan of that version of Spider-Man, and it would be neat if they're doing the multiverse thing to have him come back to do like a little bow. But if he's not, and it's a good movie, then that's great. That's the most important thing, is that it's a good movie and it tells a good story. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of entitlement in fandom where people, and sometimes even some people who aren't necessarily like toxic fans, but they fall so in love with their own fan theories that when the show or the movie doesn't prove those out, they get mad and they hold it and they take it out on the movie or the show. Like, oh, I can't believe they did that. It's like, nobody ever said they were doing your thing. Like, you made your own thing up in your head. Nobody said that's what it was going to be. There's a lot of that happens. And I think it's a real shame. Another super chat from John Burns, who says, fuck that, Q is the Trek version of the Joker. Maybe. Although I think in terms of overexposure, I think the Borg is a better example. I mean, you can argue. I think they brought Q back too many times on Voyager, but at the same time, I mean, some of Q, with the exception of maybe one episode, I think Q's episodes on Voyager were at least okay, and Q's first episode on Voyager was actually really good. It was the second one that was like, oh shit, that's not good. So in terms of quality, I think Q holds up better than the Joker does, or the Borg. But yeah, I mean, in terms of I mean, Q is definitely more like the Joker in terms of his character than the Borg. But in terms of the use in the story and the overexposure, I think the Borg is still probably a better choice. And John clarifies, I meant the Dark Knight Joker, not the Joker. Carlisle Cinephile says, I want Maguire in it too, but I don't think the film will be bad based solely on if he doesn't show up. Yeah, me too. Exactly. I agree exactly. Kemp Chalmers says, why isn't Lawrence Fishburne in the new Matrix? I have no idea. Like, I'm going to watch the new Matrix just out of curiosity and because it's going to be on HBO Max and I subscribe to HBO Max anyway, but I'm not like, I could care less about it. Like, I'm not a super Matrix fan. I think the first one is like a fun little action movie. I did not really enjoy either of the two sequels. I thought they got way too full of themselves, and this is a mythology now. And it's like, oh my fucking God. I could not care less about any of this stuff. But so I'm not like super invested in the new Matrix movie, but I will check it out of curiosity. But I don't know why Lawrence Fishburne isn't in it. I mean, they didn't they kill Morpheus in one of the sequels? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but yeah. Oh, Sinister Intelligence says, are you looking forward toward the launch of the James Webb Telescope? Yes, I'm really excited about that. Yeah, the James Webb Telescope is like the next generation space telescope, the replacement for the Hubble. It's been coming for years and years and years. And I'm really, really looking forward to the James Webb Telescope and hoping that looking forward to what it lets us see that we haven't seen yet. Yes, I'm super excited about the James Webb Telescope. John Burns says, how close is nanotechnology? Could it be used to eliminate viruses in humans? I have no idea how close it is, but I guess it could. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea, right? You get the tiny little machines and they go inside. And if there's viruses in there, you can set your little nanobots into the bloodstream and they'll hunt down the viruses and act like an augment to the immune system, right? That's kind of the idea. So I guess it could be used to eliminate viruses in human. I don't know. Ask Dr. Francis Collins. He's retiring pretty soon. He'll have some free time. And here's another super chat from Kirak 2011 says, now for my Trek question, your thoughts on who would win, Dominion versus the Borg. Now, while I think the Borg can't assimilate the founders, there's still a great war and they could assimilate the Jem'Hadar. Well, no, I mean, look, the Federation beat the Borg. So why couldn't the Dominion? Like, I wouldn't count out the Dominion. I think if any, I mean, the Borg might win just through sheer numbers. Like if the Borg through the impression we've always gotten in the shows is that the Borg control just this massive region of space and have so many ships and so many drones that like if they just threw their entire number at somebody, like they would win just through sheer brute force. So I guess you wouldn't want to count. You wouldn't want to bet against the Borg just on that basis. Like if they just completely threw themselves at the Dominion with everything they had, and assuming that they would be, capturing people and assimilating people and making more Borg as they went, it would be kind of hard to bet against the Borg. But I don't think it's necessarily a given that the Dominion would lose. And again, it's all made up anyway. So, it depends on how you would write it. What's the best story? Is the best story the Borg win, or is the best story the Dominion win? Like what's the tale you're telling there? Steve Schmeling says, do you think the landlord, Mr. Ditkovich, will be in No Way Home? And Carlisle the Cinephile says, the characters that will make or break No Way Home for me will be Mr. Aziz and Mr. Ditkovich. They must be in the movie. Oh, boy. I would pop if Ditkovich was there. That would pop me if Mr. Ditkovich showed up. If there's like a an interdimensional portal opens and Tobey Maguire runs through, and right before the portal closes, you see Ditkovich lean out and go, "Where's my money?" And then it closes. Like that would pop me. That would be great. Jacob Monroe, Danielson versus Page. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that. I assume because they're doing it on free TV and because Page just won the title last month that he's not going to lose to Danielson. But then again, the way they've booked Danielson being so strong, I could easily see him winning the title from Page. I don't think that's how it's going to go. In fact, I think that's probably the reason they turned Danielson heel, is so that they could build him up super strong and he would lose, but it's a heel losing to a babyface champion. So it doesn't actually hurt Danielson as much as it would if it was like two super powerful baby faces clashing and one babyface beat the other. Like then that has more of a chance of hurting the losing babyface in the eyes of the fans. But if Danielson is a heel and kind of a dick, so that the fans want him to lose and he loses one match to the world champion and then goes right back to kicking ass after that, that's not such a big deal. That doesn't really hurt Danielson. So I assume Page is going to win, but I'm not sure. And I'm assuming it's going to be a fantastic match, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Yes, exactly, Steve. Rent? he just comes out of the portal and sticks his head out and goes, "Rent? Come on." Yeah, that I would pop if I would applaud in the theater if Mr. Ditkovich showed up in Spider-Man No Way Home. Kirog 2011 with another super chat says, final question of the night. Did you watch the He-Man Revelation second 5-parter? Obviously not asking for your thoughts, just seeing if you saw it. Okay. Well, if you're not asking for my thoughts and you just want to know if I saw it, yes, I saw it. And I will say no more. But I did watch it, yes. Pedro says, enlighten me. Heel, babyface. I thought I understood English. Oh, I'm sorry. So that's wrestling jargon. Yes, that is pro wrestling talk. In the parlance of professional wrestling, a babyface is a good guy, like a heroic wrestler, and a heel is a villain, is a bad guy wrestler who cheats, and is the babyface is the guy that everybody cheers, and the heel is the one that everybody boos. So yeah, so I apologize for the for the confusion there, but that was wrestling talk. I would too, Steve. I would absolutely plots. Joe McClory says, have you looked into local wrestling groups? I have a coworker that does it, and it's really fun. I used to go to local shows. There is I think there used to be a wrestling school in Hagerstown. I think it's moved to Pennsylvania now, to Chambersburg, I think. But there used to be a wrestling school in Hagerstown that would put on wrestling shows with the students every week, and I used to go to those like religiously about 20 years ago. And I have occasionally gone to like a local, like an independent show around here in the last several years, but I mean not as a regular thing. But I've checked out local wrestling before, yeah, for sure. And it is fun. It is absolutely. Yes, Pedro, exactly. A babyface can turn heel, and vice versa. Yeah, if a good guy becomes a bad guy, then that is a heel turn, and if a bad guy becomes a good guy, then that's a babyface turn or a face turn. Geek, yes, I do remember the Outer Limits show in the 90s. Yes, I used to watch it a lot. It was good, yeah. Especially the first couple seasons, it was really good. Ghost Wheel asks, would you rather be a heel or a babyface? Oh, it's always more fun to be a heel. I would love to be a heel. Yeah. Being a heel wrestler would be the most fun job ever. If I could actually wrestle, if I could actually go in the ring, like, yeah, being a heel would be the best. I would love to be a heel. John Burns says, are you watching Wheel of Time? Alex Rider, a sci-fi show where a small crew on a spaceship goes after corporations called Dark Matter. I still have not watched Dark Matter. I've never seen, I've seen commercials for Alex Rider, but I've never watched it. And Wheel of Time is not going to happen. I read the description of what Wheel of Time is on Wikipedia and I fell asleep. It's just not my thing. Yeah, 255 AD. I answered that one already. Okay, so here's another one. It says, with regard to the question on gerrymandering, don't you think it's morally justifiable to subvert democracy to stop fascism? Like, wouldn't you rig the 1933 German election if you're good? Well, that's kind of the reason why I'm not that upset about it. I mean, where I acknowledge intellectually that I think gerrymandering is wrong, but like if it's the Democrats doing something to stop the Republicans from taking more power, like I'm not going to get that upset about it. Like I'm not going to pull my hair out and go like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this. It's just wrong. Like I don't care. And Matthew, I think I remember that one, that Outer Limits episode with Enrico Calantoni. I think I remember that one. It's been a long time though. It's been a while since I've seen most of those. I haven't watched any of those recently. And Pedro, honestly, I mean, if you say something that offends wrestling fans, I say this as someone who has been a wrestling fan my whole life. If you say something that offends a wrestling fan, it's probably on the wrestling fan, because anytime a wrestling fan gets offended by anything, they need to remind themselves of one very important thing. They are a wrestling fan. And you just need to you need to keep that in mind. You need to keep some perspective. If you are a fan of professional wrestling, which I love, but is an art form that has some problems. So if you are willing to be a wrestling fan and be open and honest and public about it, you need to maintain some perspective. you know. Um, John Burns with a super chat says, checked out Ron Glass in a Twilight Zone episode called Eye of Newton. His co-star Sherman Hemsley. That sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen that, actually. Sounds good, though. Super chat from Kirok 2011 says, okay, I meant to say I wasn't asking for spoilers, but whether or not you liked it. And without spoiling anything, I think it retconned the first 5 episodes. I thought it was garbage. I did not like it at all. I thought it was absolute garbage. I thought it was worse than the first 5 episodes, and I didn't like the first 5 episodes. I thought it was terrible. So there you go. But not so terrible that I wish I hadn't watched it. Referring to an earlier question, but I thought it was awful. I didn't think there was a single good thing about it. John Burns with another super chat says, David Hyde Pierce creates a prison Outer Limits. I don't know if I remember that one either. Kirok 2011 with a Dana, I'm going to wrap it up soon. I know you're fading. I'm glad you've been with us this whole time. I know you've had a rough day and a long day and a long week, so I'm going to wrap it up really soon here. But let me answer Kirok's super chat here. It says, speaking of wrestling, what are your thoughts of Andy Kaufman versus Lawler? I think it is one of the greatest angles in the entire history of professional wrestling. Not just that famous bit where Lawler gave him the pile driver and he went to the hospital and then, Lawler slapped him on Letterman later like that. I mean, that's the part that everybody knows. That was like a year-long storyline in Memphis wrestling between Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman, where Kaufman came in as the heel, as the cocky, out of town, big shot Hollywood heel. And they had their fight at first, and then Kaufman got turned on by Jimmy Hart and tried to win Lawler to his side and, convince Lawler that he was a good guy now. And then turned on him again. And like, spoiler alert for like 40-year-old wrestling angles. But anyway, the whole Kaufman Lawler thing was genius. Was a wonderful example of how pro wrestling can be when it's well done and when it's fun. And I mean, the actual wrestling matches are garbage because Andy Kaufman wasn't a wrestler, but the angle, the storyline, the twists and turns, the interviews. Oh my God, those interviews that were at the beginning when Kaufman was sending in those videotaped interviews to taunt Jerry Lawler on Memphis TV. And he did the, I'm from Hollywood. I've got the brains. I'm not some redneck from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm smarter than you, Jerry Lawler. Like, oh my God, that stuff is brilliant. I love the Lawler and Kaufman stuff. And let me check for final questions, then I will wrap this up. Sinister Intelligence. That sounds like a great recipe for a wonderful night. Called in sick from work, going to watch Star Trek Nemesis and eat Chinese food. I'm not a big fan of Star Trek Nemesis, but it's a fun movie to watch. And especially if you're eating some Chinese food and enjoying it, I think that's a recipe for a good night. Liam Foley says, as a fan of the MCU's Captain Marvel, do you think the backlash to that film is due to men not liking a strong female lead character? I think virtually 100% of the backlash to the movie was that. Yes, absolutely. Homebody, I'm glad you enjoyed the stream and enjoyed the chat. I saw earlier where you said you hadn't had such a good day. So I'm glad that you enjoyed the stream. I really am. 255 AD says, can you imagine a thing that would make you dislike an artist that wouldn't be them doing something immoral? Like I said, this guy is complaining about fans doing derivative work. I'm not saying that there isn't something. Like, I can't think of anything right now, but I mean, I'm sure there is something. I just can't come up with it. And John Burns says, how did you like Pete Davidson's cameos in The Rookie? I thought he did very well. I didn't see that, so I can't speak to it. All right. Oh, Ghost Will. I've really liked Hawkeye so far. Yes, I'll just say I don't want to get into another big long thing because I'm ending the show. But I think Hawkeye has been excellent so far. I've really liked it. Yeah. So there you go. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget the charity links down below. Help out some friends of ours if you have a few extra bucks to spare and you want to put them toward a good cause. Charitylinks.page. Oh, you're welcome, Kirok 2011. One last super chat says, "Thank you. I needed this. Thank you. Have a great night." Thank you so much for your generosity and for the great questions and the great engagement. Thanks to everybody for watching and chatting, and it was a wonderful show. Hope everybody has a good night and a good weekend. And yeah, don't forget the charity links. Don't forget patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of my channel and help me to continue to make these videos and do these shows. And also, if you don't want to become a patron, you can click the join button right here on the YouTube page and become a channel member and support the channel that way. Either one of those is terrific and really helps me out. Also, if you dig the YouTube stuff, don't forget to check out the podcasts. Late Seating, which is the movie review podcast I do with Jason Harding, and the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I do alongside Jason and Dana. And a new episode of the Ensign's Log just went up today. So if you haven't been listening to the Ensign's Log, check it out. LetMeListenPodcasts.com, or links to the individual shows are in the description. So that is it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. And I will see you next time.